panhandle. So I stood out on the street corner singing songs, and after the first hour, I made $75. After 1 month of staying there, I made over $2,000. So I bought myself an airline ticket that would take me hopping my way through Australia to New Zealand and onward. And when I was there in Singapore, I made a lot of wonderful friends. Now, here's two Iranian guys that I chummed around with. And they were great fellas. They really enjoyed hearing stories about my travels and about America. They really wished they could come to America someday. I crossed now the equator and was into the southern hemisphere, where there's beautiful islands of Indonesia. And on this one island called Bali is some of the magical, beautiful Balinese dancers with their melodic dances, and ancient temples made thousands of years ago that combines Hinduism and Buddhism to make this very artistic and ornate sculptural religious temple. The people were quite nice on Bali. They lived by this kindness to the gods, and everywhere you see little offering plates, and the people were so wonderful. You know, they just invite me to come and stay in their homes, and I had so many wonderful times. They loved having an American in their house, and I really enjoyed eating some of their peanut butter vegetable dishes. I headed south for the land down under, Australia, and spent 6 months traveling around Australia. And one of the real epic journeys was crossing the desert outback. Here I am crossing the Nullarbor Plain, and I have 900 miles to go until the next town. So with so much distance to the next town, I had to pack all the food and water, everything I could pack on there. I had to wave down cars to get more water, and one time I found some cookies laying on the side of the road, and even though there was ants covered on them, I ate them all up. It was hot and dry and lonely, long distances, but it was worth seeing some of the outback, like Ayers Rock. Out in the center of this pancake-like continent is Ayers Rock, rising high above the desert. It's sacred to these peoples, the Aborigines. The Aborigines have lived in Australia for well over 40,000 years. They're an old world man, and very sadly, when the Christian missionaries arrived in the late 1700s, they were wiped out from influenza and disease, but a few of them survived to tell about their ancient practice of believing in animal spirits. On rock canyon walls are the petroglyphs painted 1,500 years ago. The Aborigines believed in a dream time. Well, the Australians were humble people, kind and very giving, as I play my guitar to try to make a few more bobs, and people would put into my helmet a couple of dollars, and I made enough money to buy a new pair of shoes. The old pair of shoes was held together with bubble gum, dental floss, super glue, Band-Aids, tire patches, and whatever else I could hold them together with. So with my new shoes, I was really delighted to be able to keep traveling. Yeah, they were pretty worn out, those old shoes. I found those Aussies to be wonderful people. They had a pioneer spirit still, and really fun-loving, kind, easygoing, and, well, they like to live it up, too. But especially I had wonderful memories of meeting those Aussies. I hopped on a plane and arrived in New Zealand. Now, New Zealand's this very clean and wholesome continent. There's such refreshing resources. You know, you feel good because it's so clean. The environment is wonderful. And here at Rotorua, in the North Island of New Zealand, the Maoris live, and the Maoris are the native peoples. The Maoris believe that Tiki is God. And Tiki is this Polynesian god that's influenced these peoples. And Maoris are related to Tahitians and Hawaiians. They're all Polynesian peoples, and back behind them is a pā. That's a sacred building for the Polynesian believers. In the South Pacific Islands, many nights I'd stay at these huts, and this is called a cause. And a cause is made out of straw and grass, and it's really air-conditioned in the hot climate. But in a hard rain, it stays pretty dry inside, and it's an exquisite design for this kind of climate. I like this island of New Caledonia because the people were rugged but very kind. Now in the Philippines, it's very common to see a rice paddy behind the village, and in the year 1581, Magellan arrived in the Philippines to explore and discover this land, and he tried to Christianize the people right away. He brought out his cross and his soldiers and his ministers, and well, that ended up in a fight, and Magellan was killed in that fight. So, you know, that wasn't the way that Jesus said to go around spreading the message. Spread it through faith in God and love, not through soldiers and armor and force. So this happened in so many places around the world that I couldn't help but begin to see it was happening very often. Filipinos love Americans, you know, and as I passed through the Philippines, I'd go through a little village, you know, and the people would, I'd say, "I have returned," and the people would shout back, "MacArthur!" And they were wonderful to me, you know, they were really kind and always jolly, and they especially just loved good old USA. And I really loved these Philippine children. They were beautiful. They had such joy and friendliness. They were so amiable, and I'd let one sit on my lap, and she'd pull on my whiskers and say, "Hi, Joe!" And I found them just to be one of the most wonderful parts of my travels. Children are just beautiful there. Now, Filipinos like to have cockfights, but I mean, these are roosters. They train their roosters to fight one another, and sometimes the people have fights too. Now, in 1986, President Marcos was overthrown by a people's revolution. The people sent out masses and crowds against Marcos's tanks, and Marcos was sort of a bad dictator, and so the truth always wins, and the people overthrew Marcos and installed a new government, and there I was in the Philippines. I found the Filipinos to be wonderful people, very kind and soft-spoken, and this is where Asia wears a smile, they say, so seeing smiling faces really helped me out a lot. Now we're going to travel across a communist country, communist Red China, where I was allowed a visa to visit this land. So I packed up my bike and headed from Canton to Guilin. And Guilin is this city with many hills rising up behind it, and it looks like a dragon's back. Guilin is the place where the folklore in China originated, of these paintings and rising hills. The architecture was influenced too, this uplifting sort of roofs on Chinese temples and buildings is influenced from the city of Guilin. Chinese use bicycles for every means. Here's a family of four riding down to the marketplace. And they don't have allied moving vans in China. When it comes to moving to the next town, you gotta just pack up everything on a cart. Now, Chinese people are just like people anywhere else. They love their children, and as I learned a few Chinese words, it helped me greatly to get up close and meet people. One of the strange things that happens was, in China, I was heckled. That is, people laughed at me as I sat in a park writing in my journal. They thought that was really funny. They thought I had a lot of guts, and they also thought I was looking pretty silly. So they'd get up and they'd jeer and hiss at me, and sometimes I got a feeling of prejudice. I know what it's like to be laughed at now, and it's not very fun. But I can understand why the Chinese did this. You know, they just hadn't seen many travelers like me. So to them, I was a rather odd-looking character. I think I'm kind of an odd-looking character even now when I look at that. I found it was important not to get too uptight when they laughed. Instead, try to be a good ambassador of sorts and do something fun. Leave them laughing. Maybe then the next traveler that follows behind me will